This happened when I was 16. Still in high school. Still relying on my mom or my own 2 feet to get around. It was the weekend. My friend Haley was having a few of us over because her parents were out of town. My mom dropped me off and told me if she wasn't tea-back by the time I needed a ride, I should just walk home. Haley lived only about 20 minutes away on foot. Everything started off fine. It was me, Haley, and a few of our girlfriends hanging out in her backyard. Then, out of nowhere, some boys from our school showed up. Haley hadn't told me she invited them. One of them was a guy I had some uncomfortable history with, so I wasn't happy. After a while, I decided I just wasn't feeling it. I left. I texted Haley how annoyed I was. She apologized, begged me to come back, but I just wanted to go home. About 5 minutes into my walk, I slowed down. I thought I heard footsteps behind me. I stopped, and the footsteps stopped too. I turned around and saw a middle-aged man with a hoodie pulled over his head, hands in his pockets, and a weird smile on his face. He said, "How you doing?" I responded with a short hi, then turned around and kept walking. It's the suburbs people walk at night sometimes, even if it's late. But 5 more minutes passed, and every time I looked back, he was still there. Same distance, maybe a little closer. He spoke again. "Isn't it a beautiful night?" "Love this weather," I answered, briefly just enough to be polite, but I didn't slow down. Then he asked, "You from the neighborhood?" "No," I said firmly. I started texting my friends for help. Ironically, the boy I didn't want to see earlier, Brandon, was the one who agreed to come pick me up. That's when the man behind me said something that chilled me to the core. He said, "I'm not gonna hurt you. You live by the elementary school, right?" I stopped and turned around. He had stopped too, still smiling. But now, it looked more fake, more twisted. I screamed, "Leave me alone," and I ran. He chased after me. I could hear his footsteps getting closer. I screamed again, louder this time, "Help me!" Lights in nearby houses started turning on. That must have scared him, because he suddenly turned and ran off into the darkness. I stayed with a nearby couple who came outside after hearing the noise. Soon, Brandon showed up and drove me home. It was only about a minute away, but it didn't end there. When we got to my house, my mom still wasn't home. I didn't want to be alone, so I asked Brandon to stay. We stayed up talking, trying to forget what had just happened. Then we heard footsteps circling the house. My room was upstairs and faced the backyard. We heard the gate creak open. I nearly called out Mom, but something told me not to. We looked out the window. No movement. Until we heard a man's voice say, "I see you up there." I gasped and stepped back from the window. Brandon shouted, "We're calling the cops, you freak." And we did. The cops arrived shortly after. Just having them there made me feel safer. Brandon stayed calm and talked to them. I was shaken, but relieved. My mom came home not long after. She was just as freaked out as I was. The police stayed around for a while to make sure we were safe. After that night, I never walked anywhere alone again. Even being in our backyard made me nervous. My mom had my uncle install security cameras, all clearly visible, to scare off anyone watching. Eventually, she decided to move. She couldn't stand seeing me live in fear. We never found out who that man was, how he knew where I lived, or why he came back that night. But I still remember his smile and that chilling voice that said, I wouldn't call myself a very active person, but I do enjoy working out and running every now and then. You know, just to stay in decent shape. My friend Jay and I usually work out together. Jay's always been in shape, and in a way, he's like my personal trainer. We often go for runs late at night, around my neighborhood. It's a quiet area, well lit, and has always felt relatively safe. But all of that changed 2 months ago. Let me explain how my neighborhood is laid out. There's a main road, the kind that loops around, and from it, several smaller roads branch off like veins. All of them eventually connect back to the main road again. At the very edge of it, there's a dirt path that extends into a more rural area. Local farms, larger private properties, and woods. That layout is important to what happened that night. Jay and I decided to change things up and take an unusual route. Starting from my house, cutting through a wooded path onto one of the smaller side roads. From there, we'd reconnect to the main road, head down to the dirt path, and then circle back home. Yeah, it sounds complicated, but we did it to stretch out the distance. Our usual loop was starting to feel too easy. We started the run like we always do, casually talking about high school drama, laughing, keeping a steady pace. We noticed something. Footsteps behind us. At first, we didn't think much of it. That trail's used by other runners too, and people often walk through it to cut across the neighborhood. But these footsteps, they weren't just behind us. They mirrored us. When we sped up, they sped up. When we slowed down, they slowed down. Every step, every change in pace was matched. Jay and I exchanged a look. We both felt it. Something wasn't right. Still, we kept going. We were close to the road again. Once we exited the trail onto the well-lit street, we turned back to check. No one. There was no one behind us. We both had that what the hell look on our faces. Maybe it was just another runner trying to keep their distance. Maybe they took a turn somewhere. So, we shrugged it off and kept running. We made it onto the side road, then back to the main road. Eventually, we reached the dirt path, the one that stretches into the darker part of town. There are no streetlights on that path, just trees on both sides, towering, shadowy, and quiet. We ran about a mile down that dirt road, and at first everything was fine. But as we turned around to head back, I saw something. A shadow, a figure, darted into the trees on the left side of the road. I froze for half a second. He dismissed it, saying I was just tired and seeing things. Honestly, I almost believed him. We pushed forward, moving quickly, not speaking much. Then, just as we were about to reach the main road again, we heard it rustling about 20 feet behind us. We turned around, and there, standing dead center in the road, was a man. He was facing away from us, wearing a black hoodie, ripped, dirty khaki pants, and black shoes. My heart felt like it was going to explode. Jay looked at me, then at the figure, and said, "What the hell are you?" But he stopped because that's when we heard it. Laughter. A horrible, cackling, inhuman laugh. And then, the figure turned around. He was still laughing, until he suddenly stopped. He stared at us. His eyes were wide, too wide. His face was pale. There was something deeply wrong about him. That glare, it burned itself into my memory. We didn't say a word. We just ran, faster than we'd ever run before. We sprinted the 2 miles back to my house, hearts pounding, and as we ran, we heard it again. That laugh, following us, echoing through the trees. When we finally made it home, I was shaking so badly, I threw up in my backyard. We ran inside, locked every door, shut the garage, and sat there, completely silent, trying to process what the hell had just happened. We never ran in that neighborhood again, and to this day, I have no idea who or what that man was. But if you're a night runner, stay in the light, stay with someone, and never, ever go down the dirt path. I've always loved running, not competitively, just to clear my head. I wasn't the fastest, but I had the rhythm of my feet on the ground was like therapy. Peaceful, simple. Back in high school, I used to make some side money running a neighbor's puppy Easy. She was hyper and needed to burn off energy, and I got $10 per run. Win-win. Her house was in a quiet rural area, near a forest preserve. The place was a little strange. Scattered houses, an old cemetery, some abandoned farms, and even rumors of a disbanded cult commune nearby. My parents warned me not to run in isolated areas, but I figured I was fast. I could outrun anything. One evening, just before dusk, I took Izzy out for a longer run. The sunset lit the treetops with a warm orange glow, but shadows crept across the road. It felt darker than it should have been. The only sounds were my breathing, Izzy's panting, and the steady thud of my shoes on the pavement. Once in a while, a bird fluttered or a distant dog barked, but mostly it was quieterly quiet. The farther we ran, the quieter it got, like the world itself was holding its breath. About 2 miles in, we reached a stretch of road flanked by thick woods. That's when Izzy stopped, completely still. Her ears perked, and she stared into the forest. A low whimper slipped out. I followed her gaze. At first, I saw nothing, just dense trees and gently swaying branches. Then, between 2 trunks, I saw a man. He was short, maybe in his 30s, with a hat pulled low over his face, a thick jacket, and gloves even, though the weather was mild. His eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. His stillness was wrong, like he wasn't supposed to be there. I told myself he was probably just a hiker or a hunter. Still, something about how he stood half-eaten, watching sent a chill down my spine. I gave him a polite nod, pretending not to be fazed, and started jogging again. My heart beat fast or not from the run. But just a few steps later, Izzy stopped again, her body rigid. I turned. The man had moved. He wasn't behind the tree anymore. He was right at the edge of the forest, just a few feet from the road. Still staring, his head tilted slightly now, like he was studying me. He wanted me to notice. I felt cold creep down my back. My instincts screamed to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe he was just trying to freak me out. If I ignored him, maybe he'd stop. I kept running, forcing myself to stay steady. But just as I turned forward again, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. I looked back. He was sprinting toward me. He had a butcher cleaver in his hand. A scream caught in my throat as pure terror surged through me. I didn't think. I just ran. Adrenaline exploded inside me. My breath came in gasps. Izzy struggled to keep up, her leash jerking in my hand as we tore down the road. I had never known fear like that. But do you like more? The kind that whispers, if you stop, you die. I glanced back once. He was still chasing us, his face twisted in rage, his mouth open like he was growling. The blade gleamed in the fading sunlight, but his movements were erratic. His arms flailed, legs pumping too fast, almost in. Then I realized he wasn't breathing. I could hear everything. Ione gasps, Izzy's panting, even the rustling of trees. But from him, nothing, just the pounding of his boots behind me. No breath, no sound but footsteps. We reached a neighborhood. Cutting through yards, my vision blurred, my legs burned, but I didn't stop. I ducked behind a shed, dragging Izzy with me, pressed myself against the wooden wall, panting. Silence. I turned my head. At the top of the hill, he stood, watching. The cleaver hung loosely from his hand. His chest rose and fell like he had just stopped running. But he wasn't chasing anymore. He was just standing there, staring. We locked eyes. His face was blank now. No anger, no emotion. Just ... emptiness. Minutes passed. A car appeared in the distance. Its headlights cut through the dark. And then he turned and walked back into the woods. No rush, no hesitation, just gone. I didn't move for a long time. When I finally did, I took the longest, most hidden route, back to the woman's house. I snuck through her yard, avoiding the road. My hands were shaking as I took my payment. I acted like nothing happened. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell my parents. I knew they'd never let me run alone again. I don't know who he was. A drifter. Part of the old cult. Something else. But I do know one thing. I never ran in that direction again. Nearly 7 years ago, I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, surrounded by nothing but open fields and winding country roads. A beautiful place, but incredibly secluded. Over time, I started to feel trapped here, a feeling that only worsened during the quarantine. But what started as one strange encounter soon turned into something much more terrifying. It all began when I was 9. My little brother, who was 7 at the time, and I were walking our dogs near the start of our street. We were talking and not paying attention to much else. Suddenly, we heard a voice call out, "Hey, come here." A tall man with curly blonde hair was in a big white SUV, motioning for us to come closer. My brother started walking toward him, but I stopped him. I'd heard the horror stories, the ones about kids being lured into vans, never to be seen again. So, I quickly led us back to the house. When we got home, I told my mom. She brushed it off, saying he was probably just lost or needed directions. It scared me a little, but I didn't think much of it until later. A year later, in 2014, another unsettling event occurred. A black sedan. But do you like more? Down the street, when a parent confronted the driver, the car tried to run them over before speeding off. Worse still, the license plates had been removed. Although I didn't see it myself, the adults in the neighborhood were in an uproar. We were given another lecture. Don't talk to strangers. At the time, people were especially on edge due to a local tragedy, the murder of Hannah Graham. The tension in the air was palpable. Fast forward to the summer of 2018. Our neighbors went on vacation and asked me to pet sit their dog. I would go over 3 times a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once at night around 9 p.m. One night, after getting caught up in a game with my friends, I realized I hadn't let the dog out. It was well past 10 p.m., so I rushed over, worried the dog might have an accident inside. When I arrived, the dog was fine, but I noticed something odd. A black sedan was parked in the driveway. The car hadn't been there when I first arrived, and the house was empty now. One would be back for days. After a moment of hesitation, I decided to cut through the woods, to leave the house faster. I never saw the black car again, but from then on, I always took the woods route. Fast forward to the spring of 2020. I run for the track team. And since quarantine canceled practices, I started running daily on the country roads around my house. Everything was fine for the first few months, until one day, I noticed something strange. As I ran down the main road, I noticed a large white SUV on the opposite side of the road, matching my speed. There were few cars out there, and the roads were empty, so this struck me as odd. I turned down a side street, and it didn't follow. The next day, the same SUV was there again, parked at the end of a driveway, and as soon as I passed, this went on for days. It was always the same every time I ran. The car would follow me for about a mile before turning off. On the 11th day, I turned down the same side street and saw the black sedan again. This time, I noticed something even more disturbing. Underneath the car, barely visible, was the silhouette of a person. They were hiding, trying not to be seen. At that moment, I realized the SUV was now at the top of the street, blocking my escape. My heart was racing, and I knew I needed to act fast. I sprinted past the SUV, and as I did, a man jumped out and chased me. Thankfully, I had been training for track, and I was able to outrun him. He yelled after me, saying he just wanted to talk, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. I sprinted the remaining mile back to my house, and when I got there, I told my mom everything. My mom immediately called the police. Unfortunately, since I didn't get a license plate, there wasn't much they could do. They promised to investigate, but to this day, I've never heard anything more about it. Looking back, it is clear to me now that these men had been trying to kidnap a child from our street for years. I can't help but wonder how many other kids they might have tried to lure. I still have nightmares about the man who chased me. The same man who tried to abduct me when I was 9 years old. Sometimes, the most terrifying things aren't the monsters we read about in stories they read, the ones that walk among us. And it's the people we least expect that can be the most dangerous. Thanks for watching. If you found this story chilling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real life. Stay safe out there. A few years ago, I was going through one of the lowest points in my life. I had just gone through a painful breakup with someone I thought I'd marry. Everything felt pointless. I was isolating myself, barely talking to anyone, barely eating, barely functioning. My days were all the same. Work in silence, come home, and crawl into bed. Weekends were worse. I'd lie on the couch watching movie after movie, and none of it even registering. One Saturday night, I was in my bedroom, which doubles as my personal entertainment space. TV, couch, everything. I wasn't even paying attention to what was playing. Just some generic horror film I clicked on randomly. The audio was horror. Sound effects were obnoxiously loud. But I kept watching, mostly because I was too drained to change it. Then I noticed something odd. Every minute or so, I kept hearing this metallic clang, like a pipe striking concrete. It didn't fit anything in the movie. No metal props, no warehouse scenes. Just a weird, repetitive sound that made no sense. At first I assumed it was just part of the terrible sound editing, but it kept happening. The exact same clang, same volume, same pitch, too perfect to be a coincidence. Eventually, I paused the movie to get up and use the bathroom. But right as I was about to hit play again, I heard it. The clang. Except now, with the movie paused, I knew for sure it wasn't coming from the TV. It was coming from somewhere inside my house. I froze. I stayed completely still, just listening. About 45 seconds later, clang, clear as day. My heart was pounding. I grabbed the closest thing I could find. Kitchen knife and checked every room. Closet, hallway, pantry. The place was empty. Then I heard it again, but this time, quieter. It was coming from my own room, the room I had just left. That's when it hit me. The windows were open. It was springtime and I'd cracked them earlier for some fresh air. I moved toward the nearest window and pulled the curtain back slightly. And that's when I saw it. One of the deck chairs in my backyard had been placed right in the middle of the lawn. And standing next to it was a child, maybe 8 years old, just standing still in the dark, holding what looked like a PVC pipe. He wasn't saying anything. He smacked the chair again. My whole body tensed. Why was a child out there, alone, in the dark? He hadn't knocked, hadn't said a word, just hitting metal for nearly an hour straight. I tried to tell myself he was lost, Maybe he'd wandered off from a nearby house. But deep down, something felt off. Still, I couldn't just ignore a kid outside. I turned on the back porch light and walked downstairs, trying to stay calm. I told myself I'd open the door and ask if he was okay. But as I reached for the doorknob, I stopped cold. It felt wrong. If he needed help, why didn't he approach the front door? Why not call out? Why just hit a chair? I backed away slowly and went to a small side window that overlooked the backyard. And then I saw them. 2 men, dressed in black, crouching on either side of the back door, completely still waiting for me to open it. I hadn't made a sound, but one of them suddenly turned and locked eyes with me through the window. I dropped the blinds and sprinted upstairs, calling 911 on the way. A second later, I heard banging someone trying to break the back door in, then footsteps. Inside, I locked myself in the bathroom and held my breath as they walked up the stairs. One of them tried the bathroom door, then slammed into it trying to break through. I yelled out that the police were on their way and then silence. They booked. By the time officers arrived, they were long gone. I told them everything, but I had no footage, no clear description, just a haunting memory. What really disturbed the police was the child. They told me criminals who use children in break-ins are often the most dangerous kind because it shows planning, manipulation, and a complete lack of conscience. They called it a random attack. I'm not so sure. That setup was too coordinated, too calculated. I moved shortly after. Life moved on. But I still think about that kid Dan. Whether he was a victim himself, or a part of something even worse. It's 2024. I'm a college senior, graduating soon, and I've spent most of my spring breaks at home, avoiding the chaos of party destinations like Miami. This year was no different. Spring break was my chance to unwind, get away from school, stress, and just relax. But this time, something strange happened. Something that still chills me to the bone. It was a Monday morning. I didn't have any plans except for a quick workout. I'm a morning workout person. It's the one thing in my life that keeps me grounded, even when everything else feels chaotic. So, I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and dragged myself out of bed. By 6:20, I was dressed and out the door, ready for the gym. The drive to the gym took about 15 minutes, mostly on back roads, through quiet residential neighborhoods. Nothing ever happened out there. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and nothing ever stood out. But as I was driving, something caught my eye. An ice cream truck, parked on the side of the road. The engine was off, no lights on, and it was early March, still chilly out. Kids were all in school, so there was no reason for an ice cream truck to be there at 6:30 a.m. I glanced at the driver's side window as I drove by. It was empty. I tried to shrug it off and continued to the gym, but something about it felt off. I didn't think much of it until after my workout. I got a quick bite to eat and headed home. As I turned onto the same street, I saw the ice cream truck again. It was still there, in the same spot. That felt odd, considering how uptight the neighborhood was. Someone would have called it in by now. Curiosity got the better of me. Instead of heading straight home, I drove around the block to pass by the truck again. This time, I saw someone inside. A man. He locked eyes with me as I passed. His appearance was unsettling. A long, pointed nose, a scraggly beard that looked like it hadn't seen a razor in years. He looked like someone who lived in his vehicle, and it rubbed me the wrong way. I quickly drove home, trying to shake the feeling that something was wrong. My parents weren't home, so I had the house to myself. A few hours later, I went out to check the mail. As I walked down the driveway, I froze. The ice cream truck was parked across the street, just a few houses down. I couldn't believe it. Had he followed me? I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of it. It didn't make sense, but there it was. I quickly grabbed the mail and went back inside, hoping it was all a coincidence. Once I was upstairs, I went to a guest bedroom with a window that overlooked the street. I peeked out, and sure enough, the ice cream truck was still there. I watched it for a while, but nothing happened. I couldn't stop looking at it. Every time I tried to focus on something else, my mind kept drifting back to that truck. After a while, I decided to take a look through a pair of binoculars my brother kept in his room. I returned to the window and peered through the binoculars. What I saw made my blood run cold. The man was looking back at me through his own binoculars. He saw me watching him, and as soon as our eyes met, he dropped the binoculars, started the truck, and drove off. I was horrified. He had been spying on me the whole time. I called the police, not knowing what else to do. I told them everything: the truck, the man, and how he had followed me home. The dispatcher assured me they'd send someone to patrol the area. Afterward, I told my parents when they got home. They were concerned but reassured me that it was probably nothing. I tried to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. I grabbed my phone off my nightstand, trying to figure out what had woken me. Then I heard it. Music. It was faint, but it was there. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't over yet. It began with something so subtle. I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. A faint sound drifting in through my closed window. At first I thought it was the hum of a neighbor's TV left on overnight, but then it became clearer. Melodic. Repetitive. A jingle. The unmistakable chime of an ice cream truck. Except it was 2 a.m. I sat up, confused. Who would be driving an ice cream truck through our neighborhood at that hour? I got out of bed and approached my window, trying not to make any sound. That's when I heard it. Soft, distinct, tapping. Click, click, click. Tiny pebbles hitting the glass. It wasn't random. It was intentional. Someone was trying to get my attention. For a second, I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to look, but curiosity won. I slowly parted the curtain, just enough to peek through. Standing in the yard, illuminated by the soft orange glow of the streetlight, was a man. He was motionless, staring straight up at my window, and beside him, on each side, stood 2 children. They were holding hands, their heads tilted slightly, as if unsure whether to smile or cry. Something about their stillness. It was wrong. They didn't move, not even when the wind picked up. I stumbled back from the window and rushed to wake my dad. When we returned outside with flashlights, they were gone. No trace. No footprints on the dewy grass. No tire marks on the road. Just silence. The police came and took our statements. They said it was probably a prank, that maybe I dreamed it. But I knew what I saw. Days passed, then weeks. Life returned to something like normal. Until my mom called me into the living room one evening. She was pale. On the news was a story about 2 6-year-old twins who had disappeared from a nearby town 30 minutes away. A boy and a girl. Their photo flashed on the screen. It was them. The kids I saw in the yard. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. Still, I tried to move on. I buried myself in work. I sell cars, so I deal with people all day, and I'm used to getting calls at odd hours. One night, around midnight, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Same number. This time I answered. All I could hear was static, heavy and oppressive. Then, my own voice, saying things I had never said, insulting things, dark things, things no one should say. I stood there, frozen, listening to a warped version of myself, laugh and repeat phrases I didn't understand. Then silence. The calls didn't stop. Every night for a week, my phone rang. Sometimes it was me, sometimes it was someone else. A man with a gravelly voice, giggling like a child. A woman whispering my name over and over, getting more aggressive each time. The voices always ended in laughter mocking, distorted laughter. Then came the worst one. It was a child's voice, weak, trembling. Please, it said. Please, let us go. Please. ... That night, I smashed my phone against the wall. I got a new number. I moved to a different city. I told no one where I was going. I needed distance. I needed to forget. Months passed. No more calls. No more children at my window. I started sleeping again. I even convinced myself that maybe, somehow, I'd imagined it all. That my mind had played tricks on me. But sometimes, late at night, when the streets are quiet and the wind is still, I hear it again. That same melody, that haunting, cheerful jingle, so faint I could almost ignore it. The ice cream truck, playing somewhere down the street. When I was 22, I started renting the downstairs apartment in my parents' house. It was a convenient arrangement. I had just graduated from college, was starting my first full-time job, and needed to save money. The basement had a private entrance, a small kitchen, a living room, a bathroom, a bedroom, and a laundry room. It felt like my own place. Most of the time, my parents were often away on weekends, visiting my grandmother, who lived a few hours out of town. When they weren't home, I had the entire property to myself, or so I thought. It started one Friday night. I had two close friends over, Anthony and Jay. We were watching a hockey game, eating junk food, and drinking a bit. The vibe was chill. We had music playing, cracked a few beers, and since the house was technically ours for the weekend, we got comfortable. I kept the upstairs door unlocked because the kitchen up there had more space and a full-sized fridge. Around 2 a.m., we called it a night. Jay and Anthony crashed on the basement couch, and I went into my room and locked the door, a habit I'd had since I was a kid, more out of instinct than concern. Sometime in the middle of the night, I was woken up by the sound of faint footsteps from above. I figured one of the guys had gone upstairs for water, or maybe stumbled around looking for the bathroom. Nothing too strange. But then, I heard something that made me freeze. My bedroom doorknob started turning slowly, quietly, like someone was testing it. It was locked, so they couldn't get in. I whispered, "Jay." No response, just silence. I waited, holding my breath. After about a minute, I convinced myself that maybe one of them was confused or half asleep. I eventually drifted off again. The next morning, Anthony was gone early for work. Jay was still on the couch, groggy. I asked if he'd tried to come into my room the night before. He blinked at me and said, "No, man. Why would I?" But his answer didn't feel certain. He seemed unsure, like he wasn't totally convinced himself. I brushed it off. The next day, I spent most of Saturday out with friends. I came home late, had a quick snack, showered, and went to bed. Again, I locked the door, more firmly this time. I couldn't shake off the weird feeling from the night before. Just as I was starting to fall asleep, I heard something faint, slow movements, not directly above me now, but from the hallway, just outside my room. Then it happened again. The doorknob turned, but this time, there was a soft knock. Not loud, not urgent, just 2 gentle taps. I held my breath. I didn't move. My body was frozen. This wasn't one of my friends. I was alone. I stared at the door for what felt like forever. The knocking didn't come again. I grabbed my phone and started texting people in a panic. My parents, Anthony, Jay, even neighbors. No one responded. I didn't want to speak out loud. I didn't want whoever it was to know I was awake. Eventually, I quietly dialed 911. I whispered everything to the operator. She told me to stay calm, stay hidden, and keep my phone on. I stayed crouched beside my dresser, gripping a metal laundry rod like a bat. About 10 minutes later, I saw flashing lights through the basement window. A police officer appeared and tapped gently on the glass. I handed him the key through the window. 2 officers entered the basement and cleared it first. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. Everything looked normal. Then we went upstairs. As we moved through the main floor, I pointed out which rooms were which. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely speak. Everything seemed untouched until we reached my parents' bedroom. One of the officers opened the door and immediately shouted, "Come out now." From beneath the bed, a man crawled out. He was tall, filthy, dressed in a torn hoodie and basketball shorts. His face was pale and sickly, like he hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. His eyes locked onto mine. I'll never forget that look, blank, yet full of something unspoken. Something wrong. The officers cuffed him and walked him out of the house. One of them stayed behind to talk to me. "Do you know him?" he asked. I shook my head. I had never seen him before in my life. They told me he was probably homeless, and that it looked like he had been staying in the house for a while. They found wrappers, a half-empty water bottle, and even a blanket in a crawl space upstairs. He might have been living there for days, maybe even weeks. I felt sick. They offered to file a report and said I could press charges. But when my parents got home the next day, they decided not to. They didn't want the hassle. Nothing had been stolen, after all. But I couldn't sleep for weeks. Even now, years later, I double-check every door, every window. I sleep with a bat next to my bed. I installed cameras. I never feel truly alone in a house anymore. Because now I know the truth. Sometimes, the scariest intruders aren't the ones breaking in. They're the ones already inside. "5 years ago, I made a decision that would change my life in ways I never imagined. I left behind the constant hum of the city, the blinking lights, the endless rush, and moved into a secluded wooden cabin deep in the forests of upstate New York. I wasn't running from trauma or heartbreak. I just craved silence. I wanted solitude, the kind you read about in old books, a place to reset. At first, it was perfect. Idyllic, even. Mornings were spent fishing by the lake, afternoons reading classic novels on the porch, and nights listening to the forest breathe. No internet, no phone service, no news, just the wind in the trees and the sound of water lapping at the shore. I felt human again. That peace lasted about a month. It began with small, easy-to-dismiss sounds, branches cracking at odd hours, soft thuds outside the cabin, occasional rustling too heavy to be the wind. I told myself it was wildlife, deer, raccoons, maybe even a bear. But I started to notice patterns. The noises weren't random, they circled the cabin, slow, deliberate, almost like pacing. Then came the scratches. At first, they were faint. I'd hear them near the back wall or under the floorboards late at night, just enough to raise goosebumps. Then they moved closer to the windows, the door. One night, I heard them right against the wood behind my bed. I sat up, held my breath, and the scratching stopped. I didn't sleep that night. About 2 weeks into this madness, things started shifting in the cabin. I'd leave a book on the table, return from the lake, and find it placed upright on the shelf. A mug I left in the sink would be clean and dry beside it. At first, I thought I was just tired or forgetful. But then I noticed the drawer in the kitchen, the one I kept locked. One morning, it was wide open. Inside, the knife I always kept there was gone. My fear became real the day I saw the smudges. It was early morning, fog still blanketing the trees. When I noticed them greasy, uneven smudges on the outside of the spare bedroom window, they looked like handprints. I cleaned them, thinking it was dirt or maybe condensation. But the next morning, they were back. Same size, same shape. Like someone had pressed their hands and face right up against the glass. So I set up a chair in that room. I was determined to catch whatever or whoever was out there. That night, I sat in total darkness, bat in hand, eyes fixed on the window. At 2:14 a.m., I saw movement. A figure stepped out from the tree line, slow and silent. He wasn't holding anything. He wasn't wearing anything distinctive, just jeans and a dark hoodie. But what shook me was how still he stood. He didn't move, didn't sway. He just stared straight at the cabin, at the window, at me. Then, without a sound, he walked forward, calmly, intentionally. I lost sight of him beneath the window. And then came the sound I'll never forget, the front porch creaking. I didn't breathe. My heart was slamming against my chest. I gripped the bat and waited. Every part of me expected the door to open, but it didn't. Nothing happened. For hours, I sat frozen until the sun came up. When I finally opened the door, I saw them footprints, muddy, distinct. They led up the porch steps, across the front deck, and stopped right at the door. But here's the thing. There were no footprints leading away. That was it for me. I didn't pack. I didn't clean. I just grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove. I didn't stop until I was 5 towns away, and my phone finally got service. I never went back. To this day, I don't know who that man was. I don't know what he wanted. But sometimes, even now, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking I heard that same creak, like someone just stepped onto my balcony. And that's what terrifies me most, because maybe I never left him behind. This happened when I was about 15 years old. Back in 2008, my parents went out to the casino for the night, so it was just me and my dog Abby home alone. It was about 11 at night, and I was messaging some friends on Instant Messenger and watching YouTube videos. As I was typing and chatting away, I heard Abby barking at something in the living room. I figured it might be my parents getting home and just waited. But after about a minute or so of more barking and no sound of the door opening, I got up and went into the living room to check it out. Abby was facing the windows that looked out onto our driveway, still barking. I couldn't really see anything because the lights were off outside and it was really dark. I peered through the window and saw only one car in the driveway, so I knew my parents hadn't come home yet. I chalked it up to Abby, possibly hearing a neighbor's car door or a loud vehicle passing by, since we lived on a main road that stayed noisy even late at night. I went back to messaging my friends, but over the next 5 minutes, I kept feeling like I was hearing noises around the house. Abby would stop and start barking again at different intervals. I was about to get up to calm her down when I thought I heard a knock or a rustling sound at the living room door. I got up and slowly made my way back to the living room to look through the windows again. Nothing. I was starting to get nervous and was too scared to look through the peephole in case there was some crazy face staring back at me. I double-checked the lock and was about to leave the room when the sound of knocking came from the side door of the house. My heart fluttered. I didn't know what to think. Were my parents locked out? Was someone trying to break in? Was there more than one person? I barely had time to process those thoughts when I heard the doorknob from downstairs being jiggled, like someone was trying to open it. Our basement was basically under the house, and the entrance was hidden. To get to that door, you'd have to walk around the house, into the backyard, and go under the deck. You either had to know it was there, or be really determined to find a way in. Abby was whimpering and barking louder than ever, running from room to room trying to find the threat. It felt like the whole house was surrounded. The noises from the basement grew louder, and it almost sounded like whoever it was had managed to open the door then. Suddenly the noise stopped. My heart sank. I held my breath, frozen in silence, waiting for the next sound. Then, out of nowhere, Abby flew down the stairs and started growling like I had never heard before. She was a gentle black lab who wouldn't hurt a fly, but in that moment, she sounded like a beast ready to attack. I stayed frozen in place for what felt like minutes. Finally, my fight-or-flight instinct kicked in when I realized Abby had stopped barking. I called her upstairs and locked the inside door that led to the basement. I grabbed the home phone, since I didn't have a cell phone yet, and ran into the closet in my parents' room where one of the guns was stored. I sat there armed and ready, about to call 911 when I heard the front door open. Abby sprinted out. I yelled after her, terrified, but then I heard my parents' voices. I ran into the living room to see them petting Abby and looking confused. I spent the next several minutes recounting everything that happened. My mom was horrified, and my dad grabbed his gun and searched every inch of the house inside and out. But we didn't find anything, and I didn't sleep that night. The next afternoon, there was a knock at the front door. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively darted into another room. My dad answered, and found my Uncle Pete standing there with an envelope in his hand. Uncle Pete was, to put it lightly, a narcissistic creep. He always mistreated my aunt and acted weird around the kids at family gatherings. Nothing illegal, but he gave off a vibe that made you uncomfortable. Even the adults felt uneasy around him. Growing up, I always felt nervous when he talked to me. I can't recall specific things he said, but his presence was unsettling. His daughter, my cousin Kate, played softball in a league below mine. I loved my cousin and felt bad. She had such a strange dad. So I'd help her team with pitching and fielding. My mom and I eavesdropped from another room and overheard him say something like, "I tried to stop by last night to drop it off, but no one was home, I guess." I couldn't hear much else, but moments later I heard the front door slam. My dad came back, with his face red with anger. Apparently, Uncle Pete had been the one snooping around the house last night, trying to get in. He handed me the envelope, and inside was a card with a gift card thanking me for helping Kate with softball. A full night of fear and panic, caused by my creepy uncle. My dad had threatened him at the door, and after that, we never really spent time with him again. Looking back, I'm at least grateful. I found out who was behind it. Otherwise, I might have spent years wondering if it was burglars, a ghost, or something worse. I'm thankful Abby was there. She most definitely scared him off when he tried to get in through the basement. Still, I have so many questions. What the hell was he thinking? Why did he need to drop off a card so late at night? Why didn't he get the hint when no one answered the door? Why didn't he call first? And worst of all, what would have happened if he had gotten inside? I had spent a few days in Austin visiting some old friends. I live in Louisiana, so driving back takes pretty much the whole day. On my last day there, I got a message from Tom, a buddy from high school. He replied to one of my Instagram stories and asked, "When are you heading out?" I told him, "Today." He said he lived just an hour outside of Austin, right along my route home. We hadn't seen each other in years, but we stayed in touch online. It felt like a good chance to reconnect. He invited me to stop by. I figured, why not? I set my GPS. It was about an hour and a half away. Tom and I had been close back in high school, but like most people, we drifted after graduation. When I pulled up to his house, it looked old. Not abandoned or creepy dash. Just stuck in time. The porch creaked under my feet, and when he opened the door, I was hit by a strong, earthy, smell-aged wood mixed with something that reminded me of a hunting cabin. He gave me a warm hug, big smile. It felt like no time had passed. The inside of the house matched the outside wooden floors, retro furniture, and that faint creaking sound every time you moved. Honestly, it had a nostalgic charm to it. We sat in the living room, poured some whiskey, and caught up. One drink turned into 3, maybe 4. I started to feel it. The room got heavier, warmer, almost like it was closing in. Eventually, Tom said the obvious. "Hey man, long drive back. Just crash here." He was right. Was in no shape to drive. I offered to sleep on the couch, but he waved me off. "Nah, I've got a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's more comfortable than the sofa." We ordered Chinese food, ate, and after a bit, he showed me to the room. I don't remember much. I was tipsy, tired. I just remember the air feeling still, like the space had been sealed off for a while. I crashed onto the bed and knocked out instantly. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up, dry mouth, spinning head. The room was pitch black, except for faint moonlight slipping through the blinds. And then, I saw it, in the corner, right on the closet door. Something was hanging there. At first I thought it was a coat, just a long, black trench coat on a rack. But the shape was off. It had width to it, shoulders. It didn't hang, like fabric it stood. Like a figure. My heart started racing. I didn't remember seeing that when I came in. But maybe I was too drunk to notice. I turned over, told myself it was just a coat. Just a coat. But I looked again. Still there. I shut my eyes. Took a breath. Forced myself back to sleep. I don't know how long I was out before I woke up again. But this time, it wasn't thirst or a headache that pulled me back. It was a sound. A slow, soft creaking, like footsteps. On old wood. I froze. The room was lighter. Now just enough to see the details. I slowly turned toward the corner, and my stomach dropped. It was gone. The shape, whatever, it was vanished. I sat up too fast. Head spinning, chest tight. I scanned the room. Just the closet door. Closed. I stumbled out and rushed to Tom's room. He was out cold, snoring like nothing happened. I shook him awake. "The coat," I said, breathless. "There was someone in that room." He blinked, groggy. "What coat?" "The trench coat in the corner. It looked like a person just standing there." He sat up, eyes narrowing. "Dude, I don't even own a trench coat, and there's no coat rack in that room." I stared at him, waiting for a joke. There wasn't one. His face was serious. "Come see," I said. He followed me back. I pointed to the corner. It was right there. He rubbed his head. "You sure it wasn't a dream?" "I know what I saw," I whispered. I woke up. It was there. I looked again, and it was gone. We stood there in silence. Finally, Tom sighed. "All right, let's check the house." We searched everything. Closets under the bed, behind the doors. Nothing. No one. No coat. No signs of a break-in. Eventually, he shrugged it off as a drunken dream. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as soon as the sun came up, I grabbed my stuff and left. The whole drive back to Louisiana, I couldn't shake the image, that dark silhouette standing silently in the corner of the room, watching me sleep.